Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a world where beauty as pain wasn't a warning, it was a lifestyle. You're walking cobbled streets in a town that reeks of old fish, wood smoke and body odour. There's no deodorant, no floss, and honestly, no regular bathing either. But someone still expects you to be glowing, youthful and ethereal, as if you live in a Renaissance painting. Good luck. You're adjusting your linen coif, sweating through 4 layers of wool, and smearing on a paste of vinegar and lead to brighten your face. The mud in your teeth is fine. Your skin has to be perfect. You try not to choke on the mix of rosewater and spoiled lard wafting off your neighbour. The town bell rings, the pigs run wild through the square, and someone catcalls you in Latin. Welcome to beauty medieval style. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're 13, maybe 14. That's already old enough for a marriage contract. You've got your first big festival coming up, and you've heard rumours. There might be a nobleman in attendance. That means your mother is busy coating your face in a concoction of white lead powder, vinegar and egg whites. It smells like old salad dressing. You're not supposed to smile, it'll crack. And whatever you do, don't wash it off too soon. Because here's the kicker. Medieval beauty routines often involve materials that could literally kill you. White lead was a favourite among the wealthy. It gave you that prized pale, matte complexion. But over time, it also gave you skin ulcers, organ failure, and sometimes death. People didn't exactly know the science, but they definitely saw what it did to some women. Still, the paler your skin, the higher your status. So you kept applying. Ironically, while your face might be painted, your body is mostly left to stew in its own juices. In many places, regular bathing was discouraged. Cleanliness was associated with pride, and pride, as everyone knew, was a sin. Some religious orders even believed that dirt protected you from temptation. A dirty woman is a safe woman, said no modern skincare brand ever. This disconnect creates a kind of surreal grooming culture. Imagine a world where people spend hours on facial aesthetics but go months without a full body wash. To smell nice, many folks relied on herbs and sachets sewn into their clothing. If you were lucky, your cloak had dried lavender in the seams. If not, you might try rubbing yourself with rosemary, or masking the stench with rosewater soaked into linen. And while you may be tempted to picture everyone walking around with acne and armpit stains, well, you're not far off. But here's a weird little twist. Many medieval people did have skincare routines. They just looked a bit medieval. Like rubbing boiled cat fat on your cheeks to reduce wrinkles, or applying crushed pearl mixed with honey to brighten dull skin. Some people even believed that pigeon droppings were the secret to a glowing face. Historians still argue whether these practices were common knowledge, or fringe experiments passed down in dusty herbals and suspiciously vague Latin manuals. But the effort was always there. Even peasants had their rituals, though more rooted in superstition than science. You might smear your face with milk and chalk for a quick whitening effect before a festival, or trace protective symbols on your forehead with ash, and if you're a superstitious village girl, maybe you carry a sprig of thyme in your underclothes, just in case it keeps evil spirits, or acne, away. Meanwhile, in the noble courts, appearances are everything. You're not just showing off beauty, you're performing virtue. A flawless face says, God favours me. A dirty or scarred one might suggest the opposite. That's why you're expected to conceal any flaws and fast. Birthmarks? Cover them. Freckles? Banned. Open sores? Uh-oh. Better hide those with a velvet patch or claim it's a fashionable beauty spot. Even more twisted. Some nobles kept up the illusion by refusing to age in public. If you were lucky enough to live into your 40s, you might stop attending court entirely, just to avoid being seen as past your prime. There's a reason why so many portraits show women frozen at some idealised, ageless moment. You weren't just painting beauty, you were erasing time. And yet, behind all this paint and powder, you're still stuck in itchy wool, possibly infested with lice. Your linens haven't been changed in weeks, but at least your cheeks have a healthy red glow, thanks to crushed cochineal beetles, or maybe just the fever that's been creeping up all afternoon. It's all a balancing act. You want to look divine, but not vain. Clean, but not vain. Modest, but irresistible. You walk that tightrope every day with no deodorant, no running water, and a strict fear of hellfire if you go too far. So yeah, your skin might be glowing, but your body, Not so much. The real irony is that the more luxurious your appearance, the more toxic your routine likely is. If you smell like a dying garden and your cheeks are slowly rotting under lead powder, congrats, you've nailed the look. And yet, there's always someone who pushes it further. You hear whispers about a noblewoman who bleached her skin so thoroughly it flaked off in sheets during dinner, or a young man who paid a travelling alchemist for a potion to enhance his complexion and ended up vomiting blood for 3 days. Beauty, after all, doesn't come cheap, or safe, or clean. You're barely awake. The hearth hasn't been lit yet, and your hands are freezing. But the first thing you reach for isn't food or firewood. It's a mirror. Well, not a real mirror. Those are rare and wildly expensive. But a polished bit of metal or glass, enough to catch the colour of your cheeks. Because today, like every day, you need to look pale. Deathly pale. If you're lucky enough to have noble blood, you're expected to look like you've never seen the sun. A sun-kissed tan? That screams peasant. Labourer. Someone who works outside and therefore has no money, no class, and probably a fungal infection or two. You? You're meant to resemble someone recently exhumed, but expensively so. So here comes the lead again. Or maybe mercury. Or vinegar-soaked cloths pressed against your cheeks for hours to bleach your complexion. Some women even sit indoors for weeks, avoiding windows, eating cold foods they believe cool the blood. You're not trying to be healthy, you're trying to be ethereal. And the irony, that ghostly white skin they worship often is a sign of illness, like actual tuberculosis. Historians still argue whether the consumptive chic look, sunken cheeks, pale skin, watery eyes, was directly modelled on real disease symptoms or just happened to overlap. Either way, you're walking around trying to look as close to a corpse as fashionably possible. You want the delicate frailty of someone who might faint at any moment. If people worry about your health, you're probably doing it right. And don't forget the veins. Yes, veins. Some medieval beauty guides suggest drawing on faint blue lines across your décolletage and arms to make your skin look so thin and pure it's practically transparent. The goal is to convince people you're not just rich, you're untouchably rich. Like, I have never lifted anything heavier than a goblet rich. That said, not everyone's impressed. You might think you look like a porcelain angel, but you aren't just mutters about the girl down the lane who died after wearing that same white paste. It's fine, she doesn't get it. She still thinks boiled turnips are a fashion statement. The bizarre part is that being this pale isn't just about looking good, it's about being safe. If people think you're lower class or foreign, that can get dangerous fast. A noblewoman who lets her tan slip could be mistaken for a servant, or worse, for someone unclean. This was an era where physical appearance got tangled up with morality, class, even theology. Looking pale didn't just make you pretty, it made you blessed. But achieving this look is a nightmare. You sit for hours while someone applies layers of chalky white gunk, then dots a little blush on your cheeks, just enough to suggest you're alive. No smiling though. Smiling causes wrinkles and cracks the paste. If you're not rich enough for the good stuff, read the toxic stuff, you might try something homemade. Milk and flour maybe, or powdered bone. There's even a record of someone trying ground oyster shells. You read that right. Oyster shells. Which sounds fine until you remember they're not exactly soft and now your face is bleeding. Speaking of bleeding, guess what helps lighten the skin? Bloodletting. No, seriously. It was a thing. You're told to remove excess heat from the body, and if that means a few leeches on your temples to cool the complexion, so be it. Some women even fasted for weeks just to look paler, because if you're glowing, it probably means you've been eating, and eating is for peasants. Meanwhile, over in France, fashion takes things up a notch. There, noble women are rumoured to drink vinegar mixed with chalk. It's not tasty, but it gets results. Your skin turns ashen, your lips crack, and your energy vanishes, which is kind of perfect. It makes you look like you've never had to lift a finger. And what about the fringe cases? There's this strange tale of a Sicilian noblewoman who insisted on sleeping in a stone box filled with white clay to absorb the moonlight and keep her skin pale. It didn't work, but it did give her a fungal infection. Still, in an era with no real dermatologists, anyone with confidence and a mortar and pestle could claim to be a beauty expert. There's also the wild card of alchemy. A few pseudo-scientists and amateur magicians claimed they could create the perfect skin potion by distilling dew collected from virgin roses under a full moon. The result? Mostly mould. But hey, it's organic. The expectations never stop. Even your hands need to be pale and dainty. If your knuckles are dark or calloused, People will assume you've been working, which is basically social suicide. That's why you soak your hands in vinegar and wear gloves in bed. Not silk gloves, mind you. Linen soaked in sour milk. Fashion meets fermentation. What's fascinating is how rigid this beauty standard is, and how punishing it becomes. Imagine trying to keep your face that pale while walking through smoky streets, dodging manure and drinking from questionable wells. You've got no sunscreen, no moisturiser, and no clue why your skin is flaking. But people just say, "She must be very beautiful. Look how pale she's become." Eventually, though, the cracks start to show. Literally. Your skin's irritated. Your cheeks sting. And someone, not you, obviously, faints in church because their lead foundation finally sinks into their bloodstream. Still, you keep going. Because you've seen what happens to women who let themselves go. They fade. Not gracefully, they disappear. You've got no photos to remember them by, just a comment here, a faded painting there. "She was once very beautiful," they whisper. And you believe them, because once she looked just like you. You sit at the window, staring out at the muddy street and try to ignore the tweezing. Again. Your maid is holding a pair of small bone pincers, eyes narrowed, focused on your forehead like it's an overgrown hedge. One hair at a time, she yanks. You wince. She mutters something about your future husband not wanting a wife who looks like a goat. The goal? A towering, gleaming forehead. A smooth, domed expanse that practically reaches your hairline's retirement home. In this moment, your job is simple. Sit still and pretend like your scalp isn't being turned into a medieval slip and slide. Because yes, big foreheads are in. Not just big, huge. Think 5-head. Think, this woman contains wisdom and divine elegance and also maybe half of France. High foreheads were linked to intelligence, piety and aristocratic refinement. It wasn't just about looking good. It was about looking important. This trend hits its stride in the 14th and 15th centuries, particularly in courtly fashion. Wealthy women are plucking not just their brows, but the entire front row of their hairline. Some go further, razoring it back or even applying homemade depilatories. That's right, medieval Nair, usually made with lime and vinegar or arsenic paste. What could go wrong? Historians still argue whether this trend was inspired more by religious ideals of purity or artistic depictions of saints. Either way, your natural hairline is considered offensive now. Too low, you're barbaric. Too full, you look like a servant. And don't even think about baby hairs. That's devil's fuzz, apparently. So here you are watching the light fade while chunks of your scalp are rearranged. Someone in town swears by using bat's blood to numb the skin first. You're not there yet. But honestly, it's starting to sound tempting. And don't assume the torture ends with your forehead. Eyebrows are next. Thin is in. Very thin. Ideally you want none at all. Eyebrows are associated with wildness, animal instincts and lust. So naturally the holiest and highest ranking ladies have no visible brows. The plucking continues. Every day, if needed. If you mess up and draw blood, dab it with a vinegar-soaked cloth and move on. If you mess up and overpluck, good. You weren't supposed to have them anyway. Some women replace their lost brows with faint painted lines, tiny artistic curves made from soot or crushed berries. But only subtly. Overdo it, and you'll be accused of vanity. Or worse, witchcraft. There's a fine line between graceful noblewoman and burn her at the stake. In some circles, women even shaved their temples to enhance that egg-shaped profile so popular in medieval portraiture. You've seen those paintings. Women with heads like smooth porcelain domes looking vaguely like aliens with a pearl budget. But at the time, that was the look. Alien chic. Meanwhile, your hair, what's left of it, is bound in tight braids, hidden under a veil or headpiece. Because while you're ripping out the front, the back must be pristine, thick and lustrous, just not visible. You might use crushed ivy leaves as shampoo, or rinse with rainwater stored in barrels. There's a rumour that rinsing your hair in beer makes it shine. There's also a rumour that it attracts lice. Both are true. Let's not forget the fringe players in this forehead saga. There's one notorious case, Dame Eloise of Brittany, who reportedly shaved her entire scalp and wore a false forehead made of calfskin. That's commitment, or madness. But either way, she set a local trend that spread like wildfire. For a few years, half the ladies in town were sporting leather prosthetics under jewelled circlets, all chasing that perfect dome. And then there are the holy women, nuns who already shave part of their heads for religious reasons. Their tonsures aren't usually visible, but they inspire a kind of quiet trend, devotion as beauty. To look pious, you begin to imitate the look of someone who's literally renounced vanity. Irony, completely lost on the fashion-forward crowd. Of course, there's always pushback. Some priests rage from the pulpit about women mutilating themselves for carnal admiration. One famously compares forehead plucking to self-flagellation, only without the hope of heaven. Charming. But society keeps pushing the line. If you're a noblewoman trying to hold her place in court, you can't afford not to follow the trends. And if you're a merchant's daughter trying to climb the social ladder, you follow even harder. You can't let a few missing follicles stand in your way. Still, there's a fringe benefit, pun fully intended. With less hair around your face, your skin gets more attention. You start obsessing over glow, tone, symmetry. You smear your face with everything from mashed strawberries to powdered pearls. You exfoliate with crushed eggshells and bits of bread. You pray, not for health or happiness, but for a poreless finish. And if your forehead starts to rash, or blister, or ooze from all the chemical experiments, don't worry. That's what veils are for. A little lace and no one sees the scabs underneath. You're still beautiful. You're still winning. But some nights, like this one, you lie in bed, scalp stinging, forehead raw, wondering how something so pointless could feel so required. You can't even remember what your natural hairline looked like. All you know is that the mirror, such as it is, approves, and so will everyone else, assuming you survive the fashion. You wake up with a familiar taste in your mouth, metal, old garlic, and regret. You run your tongue across your teeth. One of them is loose again. Normal, expected even. You're 15, and no one's teeth last forever. Not in this century. But if you open your mouth and show the wrong smile at the wrong time, people might think you're poor. Or worse, unholy. Because in your world, beauty isn't just about your skin or your forehead. It goes deeper. Right into your mouth. And here's the wild part. Nobody expects your teeth to function. They just need to look good enough, at least from a distance. The reality underneath? Not so pretty. Let's start with the obvious. Sugar. If you're high-born, you've got access to this rare imported delight. It's expensive, exotic, and wrecks your teeth faster than a hungry rat in a bread pantry. You use it in sweetened wine, candies, and medicinal syrups. And as your teeth decay, blacken, and fall out, you just learn to smile more, strategically. But appearances must be kept. So what do you do when your mouth looks like a graveyard? You cheat. You stain your remaining teeth with herbs or wine to even out the colour. Some apply powdered chalk or crushed sage for whitening. And yes, that might cause more damage long term, but that's a problem for future you. Historians still argue whether tooth blackening in certain regions was seen as a beauty enhancement or just an unfortunate consequence of wealth. Either way, you're on the receiving end of it, and you better believe you're judged harder for a missing front tooth than for never bathing. Let's not forget the breath. No toothbrush, no floss. If you're lucky, you've got a rag dipped in salt or crushed mint leaves that you rub on your teeth. But most days your breath smells like last night's stew and this morning's despair. To cover it, chew cloves, fennel seeds, or licorice root. If you're rich, maybe even imported cinnamon. If not, onion it is. There's a particularly odd trick making the rounds among court ladies. Rinsing your mouth with urine. You heard that right. Supposedly aged urine whitens teeth. Does it work? Not really, is it gross? Completely. But beauty advice doesn't come with disclaimers in the 1300s. Even stranger, there's a growing obsession with pearls. Not for wearing, but for imitating. Your teeth, ideally, should look like little white pearls in a perfect line. The issue? Most people's teeth are crooked, jagged, or missing entirely. So people start carving tiny slivers of bone or ivory and gluing them in place as primitive dental prosthetics. Some even try sewing them into their gums. Infection is practically guaranteed, but at least you'll die looking classy. You know of one woman, Lady Mirabelle, who famously had her rotten front teeth replaced with a pair of hand-polished deer teeth. No one could tell, until one night at dinner, when she sneezed, and both popped out into her stew. Iconic. Tragic. Still talked about 10 years later. The church, of course, has opinions. Smiling too widely is seen as frivolous, even suggestive. So modesty becomes another tool in your arsenal. You practice the soft, close-lipped smile, a flicker of a grin, never showing too much. It's not just about shame, it's survival. You don't want people seeing the truth behind your painted lips. Ah, lips. Let's talk about those. Plump pink lips are coveted, but not overly full. That veers into lustful territory, so you dab on a touch of alkanet root or crushed rose petals to deepen the hue, but only on feast days. Otherwise, bare lips suggest modesty and restraint. But crack or flake, and you're labelled diseased. There's no winning. Some women even try to plump their lips by biting them or stinging them with nettles. Yes, nettles. Anything for that full pout. Never mind the burning. That just means it's working. Meanwhile, if you're a merchant's wife or a mid-level noble, you're stuck in the middle. Not rich enough for powdered pearl, too important to let your teeth rot openly. So you play the camouflage game. Scarves pulled up, fans held coyly in front of your mouth, always eating slowly so no one sees the gaps. Men aren't immune either. Though not held to the same brutal scrutiny, they face pressure to have clean-looking teeth, especially knights, who are supposed to represent strength, health, and courtly grace. Some soak their mouths in vinegar and mint, others swear by chewing pine resin, though that tends to glue your jaw shut more than clean anything. And if you're unlucky enough to lose your teeth early, well, dentures exist. Sort of. They're made from wood, bone, or even the teeth of executed criminals, fittingly cursed. They're tied in with wire and linen and can't be worn while eating or speaking too much. But sure, great for portraits. There's one particularly gruesome rumour, that during times of war, soldiers' teeth were looted from corpses and sold to wealthy nobles to replace their own. Whether it's true or not, the story spreads, and people still line up for tooth merchants in certain towns, ready to trade coin for something harvested in silence. Still, some try to rise above all this. The abbess in your town speaks often about inner beauty and the rot of the flesh. She's not wrong, but even she wears crushed herbs on her lips during festivals. Some habits die hard, and so, every day, you check your smile in the glint of a kettle lid, scrape your tongue with a stick, chew something vaguely minty, and pray that no one notices the darkening spot on your molar. Not because you fear pain, but because you fear judgment. Because beauty is fleeting. But the whispers, those last forever. You slide your feet into your shoes and instantly regret it. They're new, which means stiff, unforgiving, and about half a size too small. Doesn't matter. They're stylish, narrow-toed, dainty, almost elegant, and totally useless for walking. Or standing. Or existing, really. Shoes in your time aren't made for comfort. They're made for status. If your feet are soft, clean, and visibly suffering, that means you've made it. You're not out mucking stables or stomping through barley fields. You're someone whose feet exist for decoration, not function. Today's pair are Polaines, pointed shoes with absurdly long curled tips. The longer the point, the wealthier the wearer, supposedly. Some nobles have theirs extended so far they need to stuff them with moss or wire the tips up to their knees. The Pope eventually bans them for being indecent. Naturally, that just makes them more popular. You hobble through the doorway, trying not to trip. These shoes don't bend, they barely touch the ground, but they look good peeking out from under your gown, which is the point. You'll be sitting most of the day anyway, preferably with your feet visible and your suffering internalised. Historians still argue whether this obsession with tiny impractical shoes came from Eastern influence or just the natural human tendency to ruin feet in the name of fashion. Either way, by now, the trend has stomped its way across Europe, and your toes are the victims. Don't even think about arch support. These things are flat as a coin and thinner than parchment. Blisters, standard. Bunions, almost expected. But you grin and bear it, because the alternative is wearing something practical, and looking like a stable boy. The worst part? Foot washing is rare, like very rare. Most people wash their feet maybe once a week, usually with cold water and a bit of vinegar if they can afford it. Some even believe wet feet lead to illness, so the stink builds. Mix that with wool stockings, sweaty soles, and constant pressure from tight shoes, and your toes are living in a fungal nightmare. To hide the odour, some women sprinkle dried rose petals or thyme into their shoes. Others wrap their feet in perfumed linen strips. Doesn't help much. One girl you know tried stuffing her Polaines with lavender and nearly passed out from the fumes. It's a delicate balance between pleasantly floral and medieval gas chamber. There's also an unofficial competition in court circles. You can walk the longest without wincing. You practice, like it's a sport. Glide. Don't limp. Smile. Don't scream. The lady who cries gets remembered. The one who floats gets admired. Still, some try shortcuts. There's a noblewoman in Burgundy who commissions special slippers lined with swan feathers. She claims they're heavenly. No one can afford to copy her, so they just pretend their wooden soles are just as soft and soldier on. And what about peasants? Surely they're spared this madness? Well, yes and no. Most of them go barefoot or wear thick leather clogs. Practical, durable, but also loud, heavy and aggressively unfashionable. If you're caught wearing clogs in noble company, people assume you just escaped a barn. So even lower class women sometimes bind their feet to appear smaller and squeeze into hand-me-down slippers 2 sizes too tight. You're not rich, but you can look like it, right up until your toenails fall off. Oddly enough, men aren't spared either. In some courts, pointed shoes are part of military dress. Knights clomp around in polaines so long they need garters to hold them up. Try fighting in those. One story tells of a soldier who tripped over his own shoes during battle and got trampled by a pig. No one remembers his name, but his shoes became legendary. And then there's the myth that small feet equal virtue. Seriously. People whisper that a woman with tiny feet must be delicate, modest, and sexually restrained. Which is hilarious when you're trying to keep your balance in shoes designed like medieval skis. In one particularly absurd case, a noble bride has her feet bound for weeks leading up to her wedding, just to shrink them for her silk slippers. She collapses halfway through the ceremony. The priest keeps going. Priorities. You've heard of women fainting, twisting ankles, even developing permanent limps from years of wearing the wrong size. There's a healer in your town who makes most of her money rubbing salves into bruised arches and cutting away infected blisters. She calls it foot alchemy. You just call it Wednesday. The craziest part? None of this is required. Not officially. No one holds you down and straps the shoes on. But socially, you don't have a choice. Show up in flat soles and wide toes and you're seen as sloppy, provincial, maybe even a little wild. It's like wearing a burlap sack to a royal ball. So you keep going. You wince. You practice walking with your weight on your heels. You wrap your blisters in linen and pretend the limp is just part of your posture. And when you finally sit down for the banquet, feet hidden under the table, shoes off under the hem of your gown, you exhale for the first time in hours. But even then, you can't relax. Someone might catch a glimpse, might see the bandages, might smell the truth. So you slip the shoes back on and smile. Because in the Middle Ages, beauty starts at the toes, even if you lose a few along the way. You're standing in front of your maid, arms raised, as she pulls the laces of your undergown tighter and tighter until you can't breathe. Which is fine. Breathing is overrated. Your ribs creak like an old ship. Your spine curves forward slightly, and a small involuntary groan escapes your throat. She tuts at you, not in sympathy, but because your silhouette still isn't quite right. This isn't a corset. Not yet. Corsets won't really take over until the Renaissance struts in with its boning and bustiers. What you're wearing is older, cruder, and arguably worse. The girdle, a stiff, sometimes bone-reinforced underbinding meant to flatten, cinch, and mould your body into something closer to whatever vague idea of virtue the 13th century elite decided was beautiful. It's not sexy. It's not even decorative. It's a body prison disguised as piety. The goal is contradiction. You're supposed to look slim, yes, but not seductively so. The perfect figure is straight, narrow, and contained. Think walking candlestick, not temptress. A flat chest is preferable, rounded hips are suspicious, and anything resembling comfort, highly inappropriate. And if you think you can get out of this by being lower class, nope. Peasant women had their own versions of tight-bound belts and underlayers, especially for special occasions. Sure, theirs were more about support than vanity. Imagine holding up layers of wool while hauling a bucket of ale. But the pressure, still there. Historians still argue whether the earliest medieval girdles were purely functional or already creeping into the world of fashion obsession. Some believe they started as medical supports, especially post-childbirth. Others think they were moral tools, literally squeezing the sin out of your figure. Either way, here you are, mid-morning, bound up like a loaf of bread someone forgot to slice. And the weirdest part? These things don't fasten with a single lace. No, it's dozens of knots, cords, ties, and mystery loops that seem designed to make going to the bathroom a half-day project. You start dressing at sunrise for a banquet that begins at sunset. You try not to think about what's happening beneath the fabric. Rashes, welts, bruises where the edges dig into your hips. One of your ribs clicks oddly when you breathe in too sharply. Your skin smells like sweat trapped under linen. But from the outside, you look controlled, modest, proper. Men, of course, have their own girdles, sometimes padded to puff out the chest or cinch the waist for a more knightly figure. Some even wear leather corset-like pieces beneath armour, both to hold form and give them that broad-shouldered, narrow-waisted silhouette that screams, "I definitely don't cry in my tent." There's one knight in your town known for fainting during tournaments. People think it's nerves. You know it's because his waistcoat is laced tighter than a drum, and he refuses to eat for days beforehand to keep the profile sharp. Back to you. After the girdle, you layer on the kirtle, the outer gown, the sleeves, the cloak. Each one adds weight, heat, and another barrier between you and mobility. You feel like a fully wrapped parcel, one wrong twist away from collapse, and God help you if you're pregnant. Which, let's be honest, could happen any time between 12 and 45. There's no maternity girdle, no soft accommodation. You just lace up what you can and let the rest strain against you like a sausage casing. Fashion doesn't pause for pregnancy. Some try tricks, looser girdles, layered sashes, even stuffing cloth in the belly to redirect the bump. You heard of one woman who wore a borrowed girdle that had been blessed by a local saint's relic. It was supposed to protect the child. It did not. The woman passed out before Mass even started, and then there's the hygiene, or lack thereof. These garments are rarely washed, maybe once a season. You wear a linen shift underneath to catch the worst of the sweat and skin, but that shift gets soaked, daily, and then you sleep in it. Because who has time to change when you're expected to look perfect from dawn until dark? Sometimes the girdles themselves are lined with herbs, not for fragrance, well, not just for fragrance, but for cleansing properties. Mugwort sage, dried mint. It's all meant to purify your middle, draw out excess moisture, and guard against sin. As if a few leaves can save your kidneys from being smashed between bone and linen, still, you tell yourself it's worth it. Because when you pass the candlelit hall mirror, or whatever warped piece of polished metal stands in for one, you see what they see, a clean, modest, narrow shape. A body that has been tamed. Some claim the girdle wards off evil spirits. Some say it helps you maintain virtue by dulling sensation. Some just like the way it makes them feel taller, straighter, more respectable. And here's the kicker. Some women choose it. Even knowing the pain. Even knowing the bruises. Because it means control. It means access. It means stepping into rooms you'd otherwise never enter. There's a noblewoman from the coast, Lady Iseult, who famously refused to remove her girdle even while giving birth. She said it protected her modesty. She died in labour. The midwife, traumatised, became a nun, and now runs a convent that doesn't allow waist-binding at all. People call them the Loose Sisters. It's not a compliment. So you breathe in shallow sips, shift your weight from foot to foot, and smile politely while your ribs scream. Because at least for now, you're shaped like someone who belongs. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You haven't eaten in 2 days. Not because there's no food. There's broth on the fire, bread in the cupboard, salted pork drying by the hearth. But because your mother said you're looking a little plump. That's not a compliment. That's code for unmarriageable. So you nibble at a dried fig and pretend it's enough. Because famine chic is in. Thin, sharp, and borderline spectral. That's the ideal. You're meant to look like you've survived some great tragedy, emerged refined and purified. A body that says, I've been through it, and I'm still somehow noble. Never mind the fact that actual famine is raging just a few counties over. They starve because they must. You starve because it's fashionable. In this twisted hierarchy, real suffering and aesthetic suffering blur. People die of hunger in the streets while nobles pinch their waistlines and sip parsley water to flatten the stomach. You're expected to look delicately hollow, with a slight stoop that suggests poetic melancholy. A plump face? That's scandalous. A full belly? Indulgent. So, you adjust your girdle, suck in your breath, and lie about how much you've eaten today. Historians still argue whether this obsession with skinniness came directly from religious fasting culture or from post-plague trauma where thinness became survival status. Either way, the result is the same. You're hungry, and you're expected to be grateful for it. It's not just about food, it's about control. A controlled body reflects a controlled soul. The church loves this. There are sermons about gluttony every other Sunday, and statues of saints who look like they haven't had a sandwich since childhood. The more emaciated the figure, the more devout they must be. You start to internalize it. You learn how to smile through hunger. You learn that light-headedness can be elegant. You pretend your trembling hands are from holiness, not low blood sugar, and don't expect pity, not even from other women. There's a competitive edge to it. Who can eat the least? Who can go the longest on water and prayer? Your cousin brags that she only eats on Sundays and feast days. You know for a fact she faints at least once a week, but no one questions it. They admire her discipline, and when you do eat, it becomes a performance. You pick delicately at a pear, sip from your goblet, nibble at a piece of soft cheese. You never go back for seconds. Your plate stays mostly full. That way people assume you're so refined you simply don't require as much nourishment as the common folk. One noblewoman you've heard of, Lady Agnes of Ely, became famous for eating nothing but mint leaves and honey water for an entire season. Her waist shrank to a child's size, her skin turned translucent, and she was praised as an earthly angel. She died in her sleep the following spring. The nuns washed her body and found ulcers on her stomach lining. Her dresses were auctioned off before she was even buried. You might think this pressure only applies to girls, but no, men aren't spared. Knights fast for Lent and then continue fasting to maintain their lean war form. A skinny knight is considered agile, alert and pure. A bulky one, sluggish, carnal, probably drunk. There's an older man in your village who fasts every other day and claims to be living off divine energy. He looks like a coat rack with opinions. The children call him Sir Bones. He calls it sacrifice. And what about the peasants? Well, they are thin, but not by choice. They eat bread crusts, turnip soup, maybe a scrap of dried meat if they're lucky. Their thinness is considered unfortunate, even shameful. You don't want to look like them exactly. You want to look like a noble version of starving. That fine line between frail and filthy. It's an aesthetic, just not for everyone. Some women try to help the process. You've heard of girls drinking vinegar mixed with chalk to suppress appetite. Others take tiny sips of castor oil to clear the system. One girl, desperate to lose weight before a feast, licked a stone soaked in bitter herbs every time she felt hungry. She chipped a tooth, but she did fit into the borrowed gown, so everyone said she looked radiant. And then there's the other extreme, those who can't stay thin. Maybe they're sick. Maybe they've had children. Maybe they just inherited their father's shoulders. Whatever the reason, they become targets, whispered about. She used to be pretty. She's let herself go. She eats too well. They might still get married, but they won't be praised. They won't be painted. You start watching yourself. You weigh your shadow against the wall. You wrap your fingers around your wrist to see if they touch. You count how many steps you can walk before feeling faint and tell yourself, that's grace. And no one questions it. Not the women. Not the men. Not the priests. Not even you. Because thinness isn't just beauty. It's morality, status, strength, purity and mystery. It's everything you're supposed to be. So you drink your broth. You skip the bread. You smile when someone compliments your collarbones, and you pretend not to hear your stomach rumbling like a demon in the dark. After all, it's not really hunger. It's fashion. You're barely out the door before your veil catches the breeze and flaps into your face. You clutch it down with one hand, the other already adjusting the pins behind your ears. Your scalp itches, your neck sweats, and the wimple beneath it all is strangling your voice, but still you do not remove it. You can't. In your world, hair isn't just hair, it's temptation, a public threat, a literal symbol of your morality flapping around in the open air, so it must be covered. All of it. Preferably twice. Maybe 3 times if you're heading to church. Wimples, veils, and layers of linen become your second skin. You tie them under your chin, loop them behind your ears, and tuck every stray strand like your soul depends on it. Because it kind of does. Uncovered hair means one of 2 things. You're a child, or you're a harlot. And you're neither, hopefully. So you wrap, bind, and pin until your head looks less like you, and more like a decorative pillow with opinions. It wasn't always this bad. Earlier centuries allowed a bit more freedom. Braids, exposed hairlines, even a decorative ribbon here and there. But by now, the 13th and 14th centuries, that's all gone. You're expected to be cloaked. Medieval paparazzi don't exist, but if they did, they'd be lurking around corners waiting to catch a glimpse of scandalous ear. And yes, ears are scandalous. Hair is scandalous. Even necks, if you're particularly youthful looking, must be shielded. The veil becomes more than fashion, it's camouflage. You're disappearing beneath propriety. Historians still argue whether these coverings were purely religious, or if they also evolved from class-based dress codes. Likely both. Either way, you can't just toss on any scrap of cloth. Your veil has to send a message. I am modest. I am respectable. I am not trying to seduce your husband. This is especially fun in summer. Layers of linen sticking to your forehead while sweat pools at the base of your skull. You can't itch, can't adjust, can barely turn your head without tugging the whole contraption sideways. But hey, at least you're appropriate. One fringe benefit: lice, or rather fewer lice. All this wrapping does help keep the worst of the infestations away, kind of like a cloth moat, but you still do weekly checks, or force your maid to, with a comb and a candle and a strong stomach. Your hair, meanwhile, lives its secret life underneath, unseen, undernourished, and wildly romanticised. The poets talk about golden locks, cascading curls, shimmering tresses, but in real life, it's probably matted, slightly greasy, and smells faintly of onions and lavender. Still, you maintain it in private. You comb it with a hornbrush, rinse it with vinegar or rainwater, and sometimes perfume it with crushed herbs. All for no one to see, except maybe your husband, or your mirror, or God. And yet, here's the strange twist. Hair remains a kind of medieval currency. Unseen doesn't mean unimportant. On the contrary, hidden beauty becomes the most prized. Men brag about their wives' thick, glossy hair that they alone are privileged to see. Entire love poems are written about locks glimpsed through a gap in a veil. Forbidden follicles, the stuff of legends. One particularly bold noblewoman in France made headlines, well, oral headlines, by cutting her veil short and showing her braid in court. The scandal was so intense her family made her retreat to a convent for a year. She returned with a longer veil and shorter opinions. Meanwhile, religious orders take things even further. Nuns shave parts of their heads entirely, tonsure for women, a visual vow of chastity. Some nuns say the razor clears their minds, others just sigh and say it keeps things simple. But in secular life, your veil is your passport. A married woman wears it one way, a widow another. A noblewoman layers hers with silk and pearls. A servant might use coarse wool. And heaven help the girl who dares to wear silk before marriage. She'll be accused of arrogance, vanity, or worse, ambition. Men, of course, do not suffer the veil. They wear hats, yes, coifs, hoods, chaperons, but none of them come with the same moral weight. A man's uncovered hair means free thinker. A woman's? Free for all. Fair? Not even a little. And yet, some women find quiet rebellion. One noble lady you know, Lady Marjorie, lines her veil with red thread, even though it's barely visible. It's her little secret, proof she still owns a piece of herself under all the linen. Another woman perfumes her veil so richly that every man she passes catches the scent and glances up, drawn by instinct. And then there's the mythos. Some say covering your head invites divine favour. Others believe it wards off evil spirits. A few even think it keeps your thoughts pure by stopping lustful breezes from entering through your scalp. No, seriously. Lustful breezes. So you wrap yourself each morning, pin your veil tight, and smooth it with palms dampened by the same water you brushed your teeth with. And you check the mirror, not for beauty, but for invisibility. Because beauty now is something tucked away, hidden, implied. You become a mystery, a silhouette, a whisper of what might lie beneath. And sometimes, when you're alone, no husband, no maid, no mirror, you unwrap it all. You shake your hair loose, scratch your scalp, and feel the weight of your own head again. And for a moment, just a moment, you remember what it feels like to be a person, not a symbol. Then you wrap it all back up, and rejoin the world. The itch starts behind your ear, then another just above your cheekbone. You try not to scratch, can't risk smudging the velvet patch that's barely holding on. Your mirror shows a smooth, pale cheek with a beauty mark carefully placed just under your eye. But beneath that swatch of dyed silk, a weeping sore that's been crusting over for days. You caught the plague last summer, or maybe it was just a nasty rash. Honestly, who can tell anymore? The boils came, the fever followed, and miraculously, you lived. But your skin didn't. You've been patching, painting, and praying ever since. Because in this world, beauty means control, and disease, it doesn't just scar, it shames. You dab a bit more rosewater on the patch, it stings, which probably means it's working. Let's rewind. A flawless face is the medieval beauty jackpot. But how do you maintain flawlessness in a time when medicine is mostly superstition, streets are open sewers, and the Black Death pops up like seasonal allergies? You don't. You fake it. Enter the velvet patch. A tiny dot of silk, sometimes in the shape of a star or a crescent moon, pasted on with tree sap or pig's glue. In theory, it's a fashion statement. In practice, it's a scab cover. Everyone knows it. No one says it. just like today's concealer, but with more texture and potential for bug attraction. Historians still argue whether these patches were originally invented to hide pox scars, or simply caught on as symbols of status. Either way, they become the era's biggest visual lie. The more patches, the more your face suggests drama, mystery and nobility, or just that you've survived some real stuff and still made it to dinner. Let's not pretend things are sanitary. Skincare isn't about routines, it's about reactions. You react to infections, to boils, to blisters from bad makeup or worse weather. There are no dermatologists, just herbalists and old women with jars full of ideas. One of them gives you a salve made of goose fat and powdered lily root. It smells like regret. It sort of works. Maybe. You can't tell if the itch is healing or mutating. Meanwhile, your eyebrows are gone, remember? Plucked into oblivion. That means every expression has to come from your mouth or your eyes. Too bad your lids are puffy from smoke, your lips are cracked from cold, and your teeth. Well, you already know. And yet, you keep trying. Because the only thing worse than being disfigured is looking disfigured. Illness is seen as punishment, divine retribution for sin, vanity, or sleeping with the wrong bishop. So every blemish becomes a potential confession. Even worse, there's no way to tell what's safe. One day, you're using a cream made of honey and crushed cloves. The next, you're wiping your face with a miracle tonic that's 90% mercury. Your skin doesn't know whether to heal or fall off. A girl in your village once tried a paste made from burnt almonds and vinegar to fade a scar. It left a burn the shape of a walnut across her jaw. People now call it her martyr's mark. She's not amused. You've heard stories, noble women locking themselves indoors for months after outbreaks, terrified of being seen with blemishes. A certain baroness had her portrait painted with her scars airbrushed out, by a monk who had never even seen her face. He just guessed. Made her look 15 years younger. She paid him double. And still, the pressure is constant. You're supposed to glow, radiate health, be soft, unblemished, and ideally translucent. But the world around you is full of rot, rats, and reasons to break out. The contradiction is cruel. Survivors of illness are ignored. Beauties with invisible skin issues get worshipped. Meanwhile, you're using crushed chalk to even out your complexion, and praying your velvet patch doesn't fall off during supper. Even the wealthy aren't immune. They just have fancier problems. A duchess in the next county has a personal servant just for managing her facial patches, arranges them like constellations, hides half her cheek in velvet dots. She's considered mysteriously elegant. You know for a fact she's hiding a boil the size of a plum. And then there's the plague. The big one. Everyone knows someone who didn't make it. You remember the sound of the bells, the way the streets fell silent, the soot in the air. When the boil started on your own arms, you thought that was it. But you got lucky. Sort of. Now you hide the scars, scrub the scabs, and coat your skin in anything remotely sweet-smelling to drown out that hint of rot that clings to your sweat. You can't tell if it's memory or reality anymore. There's this weird superstition now. Some believe that women who survive the plague carry a kind of glow. Not literally, but spiritually. The deathless light, they call it. Men chase it. Women pretend to have it. And if you don't, better get some powder, a patch, and a story. So you do. You smile through the itch. You flirt with one cheek turned slightly away. You reapply your velvet dot just before entering the hall. You make sure to sit with your best side facing the candles. And when someone says you're radiant, you say thank you and hope they never look too close. You pass a group of boys loitering near the market and brace yourself. One of them wrinkles his nose, the others snicker. One coughs out something that might be a compliment, or might just be, "You smell like boiled onions and dead bees." You keep walking, trying to ignore the sting. Not from their words, but from the rosemary oil you slathered under your arms this morning. It burns like a holy punishment, which in a way it kind of is, because in medieval Europe smell is everything. It's not just about fragrance, it's about moral worth. People literally believe that sweet-smelling bodies are closer to God, and that foul odour, that's sin, leaking out of your pores. You haven't bathed in a week. There's no hot water unless you boil it yourself, and the town bathhouse closed after the last syphilis panic, so you mask the funk, like everyone else. Today you've got crushed mint behind your ears, clove oil on your collar, and a sachet of dried lavender stuffed into your bodice. You smell like a medieval salad with body issues. Perfume exists, sort of, but it's nothing like the floral mists and atomizers you might dream of. It's more of a process. Think melted animal fat mixed with herbs, rosewater infused with spices, oils that cling to fabric more than skin. Some are strong enough to make your eyes water, a few might make you faint if you're unlucky, or if the mixture included a little too much myrrh and not enough common sense. Historians still argue whether these scents were meant more for seduction or sanctity. The line between the two is thin. You wear your perfume the way a knight wears his armour, functional, symbolic, and probably full of rust, and the rules are strange. Smelling too nice. Suspicious. What are you hiding? Smelling not nice enough. You're slovenly, shameful, maybe even diseased. It's a tightrope walk between divine and disgraceful, and you don't even get proper soap to help. Most people clean themselves with a linen rag, warm water if they can manage it, and a bit of ash or herbal scrub. Soap exists, made from animal fat and lye, but it's rough, dries your skin, and smells like something scraped off a chimney. If you're rich, you might get imported Castile soap. Smooth, fragrant, dreamy. But even that won't save you from the smell war. Your home doesn't help. The hearth belches smoke day and night. Your clothes trap every scent from your day. The fishmonger's stall, the pigsty shortcut, your mother's onion stew. Laundry happens maybe once a month. Maybe. You don't change gowns unless you're bleeding, sick, or suddenly royalty, and yet you're judged. All the time. For your scent. A man might walk past you and sniff. Not out of lust, but assessment. Are you clean? Are you marriage material? Are you pious? A perfumed girl is assumed to have better morals, which is hilarious when you realise most of the perfume is just old wine boiled with herbs and left in a cracked jar under your bed. There's a strange belief, too, that some scents protect against illness. During plague outbreaks, people walk around with pomanders, small metal balls filled with herbs, spices, and sometimes crushed pearls. You tie one to your belt and hope it keeps death away. Spoiler, it doesn't. But it might make you smell slightly more like cinnamon bread and slightly less like despair. You know of a girl who kept a lemon peel in her corset for 3 months. It blackened, moulded, then dried out like a mummy. She still carried it around, convinced it made her cleaner. You asked once if it helped. She just said, "No one's married me yet, but they stand closer now." Even the church plays along. Some monasteries make their own incense-based perfumes. Frankincense for prayer, myrrh for funerals, lavender for purity. Nuns press dried petals into their veils. Monks rub themselves with rosemary vinegar after long fasts. It's about health, it's about spirit, and occasionally about not reeking during Vespers. There's also that one infamous friar who claimed saints never smelled bad, even after death. "The holy rots sweetly," he wrote. You haven't tested that theory. But you've been to enough relic displays to know that the church is more optimistic about decay than the average knows. And just like today, scent becomes seduction. Some women mix musk into their oils, strong, earthy, animalistic. Others lean floral, dabbling rose and marjoram onto their wrists. You heard of one noblewoman who used crushed violets and milk as a body rub. She attracted 2 suitors and a swarm of flies. One day you see a merchant's daughter discreetly sprinkling wine on her sleeves. It's not perfume, it's just wine, but it's fermented and smells faintly sweet. When you ask her why, she says, "I want to smell like I've been kissed." You pretend to laugh, but it stays with you. Still, not all smells are sins. Baking bread, virtue, beeswax polish, trustworthy, fresh hay, honest, but garlic breath, unforgivable, body odour, scandal, smelling like you, dangerous. So you douse, you dab, you pray, you dream of smelling like violets, you settle for not smelling like your cousin's goat, and when someone leans in close and murmurs, "You smell like the Virgin's garden," you smile, because your armpits are on fire from the rosemary, and your thighs are stuck together with clove oil and desperation. But for a moment, you've passed the test, and that's what matters. You hear it again, that awful double-edged compliment. She's pretty for a peasant. It's muttered as you pass the well, just loud enough to be heard, just soft enough to be deniable. You don't stop, you don't flinch, but inside you roll your eyes so hard you nearly dislocate something. Because the natural look, that effortless village girl charm, it's the biggest lie going. You're a miller's daughter, which means you wake up at dawn, haul sacks heavier than your brother, sweat through your only shift, and go to bed with flour under your nails and soot in your ears. There's nothing natural about being judged while living in survival mode. And yet, here they come, the knights, the merchants, the bored noble sons, pining after simple country girls with fresh skin and honest hearts. They write poems about you, songs about your sunburn, and make up fantasies where you do nothing all day but lean on fences and giggle. They want the look, not the life. That glow on your cheeks, heat rash, that tousled hair, dried with smoke after washing it in the river, that innocent sparkle in your eyes, mostly dust and maybe pink eye. Still, the legend persists. Peasant girls are real, unspoiled, naturally beautiful. No powders, no paint, no perfumes, just wind in your hair and dirt between your toes. The perfect antidote to the painted, perfumed, plucked ladies of court, which would be fine if those same noble women weren't faking the natural look harder than you ever could. Take Lady Avis. Rich, proper, owns 5 capes just for rain. She spends hours getting ready every morning, with maids grinding rose petals for lip stain, tinting her cheeks with beetroot, curling her hair with heated sticks, and dusting her skin with powdered alabaster. All to look fresh from the countryside, like she just walked out of a barley field instead of a silk-draped chamber that smells like civet musk and expensive boredom. Historians still argue whether this trend of artful naturalism was a response to plague death fatigue, too much mourning black, too much religious panic, or a clever upper-class ploy to seem approachably divine. Either way, it's exhausting, especially when women like you, actual peasants, are mocked for being too plain, while nobles cosplay your suffering for aesthetic points. Some noble ladies even smear a touch of dirt under their nails before outings. Not real dirt, of course, just tinted wax. It's supposed to make them look like they helped in the garden. You, meanwhile, are scrubbing your hands raw before supper so no one thinks you picked your bread off the ground. And don't forget the teeth. Your smile, yellowed from cheap barley and river water, is rustic. The noble woman's, whitened with crushed sage and urine, painted with powdered bone to appear imperfectly perfect. Deliberately dulled, because if they look too polished they'd seem vain. Everything has to be accidentally ideal. Then there's the hair. Yours is braided and hidden under a scarf because your boss at the bakehouse doesn't want stray strands in the dough. The noble women, they braid it too. Add a few silk ribbons, pin it under a sheer veil, and suddenly it's pure. You do it. It's unfashionable. Even your clothes get copied. Those homespun linen tunics you wear because you literally have no other option. Suddenly they're trending. Remade in finer cloth, stitched with silver thread, worn ironically by bored ladies at court who say things like peasants are so free. One noble girl you once overheard whispered to her sister, "I want to look like I've worked in a field, but like, not actually." Her sister nodded like this made perfect sense. It does, to them, but not to you. You're the one whose skin breaks out from river water, who has scars from hauling buckets, who shivers at night because your blanket has holes and you don't have a husband to warm your feet. You're not part of a trend, you're just surviving. Still, even in your world, appearance matters. You rinse your hair with vinegar if you can spare it. You chew parsley before a feast to sweeten your breath. You rub crushed berries on your lips before May Day. Not because you're vain, because everyone else is watching. You've heard of a girl, Clara, who tried to bleach her skin with milk and chalk to look more refined. She ended up with blisters. Her mother beat her for wasting the milk. You've also heard of another girl, Ella, who embraced her sun-darkened skin and wild curls, and married a baker's apprentice who said she looked like firelight. She smiles a lot now. Real smiles, not the careful, courtly kind. Because here's the truth. Beauty, in your world, is a scam built by people who don't have to suffer through it. You do, and you still manage to look kind, clean, and vaguely magical after 12 hours hauling grain. You wear your scars, your tan, your chapped lips, and somehow someone still says, "She has that natural look." They mean it as praise. You hear it as a punchline, but you don't correct them. You just nod and move on and keep surviving. Because you are beautiful. You're just too tired to prove it. You catch a whiff of something rich, spicy, sweet, a little musky, and for a second you assume it's coming from a noblewoman's cloak. Then the man beside her turns his head, and you realise it's him, a monk, smelling like sandalwood, clove, and maybe rose. You blink. He notices, and without shame, he smirks and adjusts his robes like a runway model at mass. Because here's the secret no one says out loud. Male vanity is alive and thriving in medieval Europe. Sure, women get most of the pressure. They're the ones plucking themselves raw and bleaching their faces with vinegar and chalk. But men, they're in it too. just with fewer rules and better PR. You'd think monks of all people would be above it. Poverty, chastity, all that humble living stuff. And yet, those monastery gardens don't just grow medicinal herbs. They grow rosemary for hair rinse, mint for breath fresheners, and lavender for skin wash. The holy men are stocking up on glow-ups. Historians still argue whether these practices were about health, devotion, or quiet indulgence. The truth? Probably all three. A clean monk was seen as disciplined, a fragrant monk closer to divine, or depending on the town, closer to temptation. And it's not just monks. Nobles, squires, even priests. Everyone's tweaking something. Hairlines, eyebrows, beards meticulously shaped with small blades or even burnt into tidy edges with hot iron sticks. That crisp jawline. It didn't shave itself. You've seen it. In the hall before a feast, a young knight leaning into his reflection in a silver platter, licking his fingers to flatten his brows, a merchant spritzing rosewater on his underarms, a page boy rubbing crushed strawberry on his cheeks for healthy colour, and everyone acts like it's perfectly normal. Because for men, grooming is refinement. For women, it's vanity. Classic. Takes a Lionel, handsome, wealthy, and reportedly in love with his own reflection. He carries a mirror tucked inside his glove. Not openly, just enough. He says it's to check for food in his beard. Everyone knows he's studying his jawline. There's also that wandering troubadour, Alain, who weaves flower petals into his cloak fringe. He claims it's artistic expression. The girls swoon. The boys copy him in secret, pretending it's for the fragrance. And don't forget the teeth. Men chew on mint leaves and licorice bark before big events. They rinse with wine vinegar. One squire reportedly boiled cow bones to whiten his teeth, then chipped a molar on the result. He still smiles crooked, but people say it adds character. Even monks, yes, monks have their tricks. You've heard of one in Kent who used lemon balm on his face every morning to wake the spirit. He also happens to have skin like polished marble, and a jaw that inspires confessions. Another kept a hidden stash of musk oil, which he applied discreetly before sermons. Said it made people listen more attentively. Probably didn't hurt that he also looked like he stepped out of a stained glass window. Male hair is another battlefield. The current style is shoulder length, lightly curled, and effortlessly holy. You know how that happens? Heat, knots, beeswax. You've seen noblemen sitting still for hours while servants wrap their hair around rods and press them gently with heated tongs. But if anyone asks, it's all natural. And eyebrows? Oh, they pluck. Quietly, quickly, and only in the right circles. A well-shaped brow is considered scholarly. Too much, and you risk mockery. Too little, and you look wild. It's a tightrope, just like everything else. Even armour becomes part of the beauty game. Knights polish their chest plates until they can see themselves. They etch symbols, animals, entire family lineages onto their helmets, not just to intimidate, but to impress. One knight was rumoured to have worn a heart-shaped crest for a whole season just to get a lady's attention. She didn't notice. He kept it anyway. You also hear whispers about scented gloves. Yes, gloves. Worn by nobles, soaked in oils like ambergris or orange flower. Supposedly, they leave a trail of fragrance as the wearer passes. One nobleman, Lord Etienne, had his gloves perfumed so strongly that people claimed you could smell him before you saw him. He liked that. And makeup. Don't laugh. Some men do wear it, especially actors, performers, or flamboyant courtiers. A little lip tint here, a little powder there. They say it's for theatrics. Everyone knows it's also for dinner. But here's the kicker. No one calls it vanity. Because men don't have to apologise for wanting to look good. They're allowed to pursue beauty without being accused of witchcraft or pride. If a man dresses well, he's cultured. If a woman does, she's hiding something. Even the church buys into it. A bishop might scold women for painting their faces, then turn and bless a young monk for keeping God's temple well maintained. Guess God prefers his temples moisturised and symmetrical. And yet, men suffer in silence too. The pressure's different, but it's there. To be tall, strong, clear-skinned, to have clean nails, steady hands, white teeth, to look heroic. You've seen a young squire almost cry after nicking his nose shaving before a duel. He wore a bandage like it was shame itself. So you watch them fuss and preen, same as you. Maybe a little less, obviously. Maybe with more approval. But it's still effort. Still performance. Because even in a world where women are crushed by beauty standards, men are quietly chained to them too. Just with fancier gloves. You tug your gown tighter around your waist as you step into the tannery quarter, but the stink punches you in the face before you even get close. It's a choking mix of rotting flesh, boiling urine, and something sharp, like copper and despair. You gag, try to breathe through your mouth, and wonder how anyone survives working here longer than a week. This is where beauty gets made. The gowns, the gloves, the powdered pigments, the leather shoes with curled toes, all of it starts here, in the shadows, in the blood. You may glide through a banquet looking polished and graceful, but someone else bled into a dye vat to make that blue silk shimmer. The truth is, your beauty is built on the backs of craftsmen, tanners, dyers, perfumers, alchemists, people who toil in dangerous conditions, inhaling fumes, soaking their hands in toxins and often dying young just to keep up the illusion of elegance. Let's start with the dyers. You like that deep crimson trim on your sleeves? It came from crushed cochineal beetles or madder root, processed in vats that stain everything and everyone for days. Some dyes require urine to activate the colour. Yes, human urine, collected in jars and poured over cloth until it glows just right. The workers call it liquid gold. You call it, please keep that off my hem. Historians still argue whether the reliance on such deadly materials was born of ignorance or ambition. Probably both. They knew the stuff made people sick. They just didn't care, or couldn't afford to. The most coveted colour of all? Blue. Specifically, woad blue. To make it, dyers ferment woad leaves into a paste so pungent you can smell it from the next village. The vats bubble with bacteria. Workers stir them with bare arms, skin slowly staining, peeling, cracking. It looks divine on linen. It smells like compost on fire. Then there are the tanners, working with cowhide, goat, sometimes dog. They soak the skins in lime and excrement to loosen the hair, then scrape them clean and stretch them on frames. Their hands blister, their lungs wheeze, their teeth fall out before 30. Your girdle, made of tanned leather. Your shoes? Cured hide, dyed black with iron shavings and vinegar. The belt your mother gave you on your naming day, stained with saffron and sweat. Someone's hands bled for that. You've heard of one tanner's apprentice who fell into a vat and wasn't found for 3 days. When they pulled him out, his skin had turned the same grey-green as the lamb hides. The master still used the batch, said it was waste not, want not. And what about makeup? Your white face powder? Likely contains lead, mercury, or arsenic. Ground, sifted and mixed by hand in smoky workshops run by alchemists with very few teeth. The red on your lips? Maybe cinnabar, a mineral so toxic it sends slow death through the bloodstream with every glamorous grin. One famous beauty died with blackened gums and melted fingernails. The priest blamed vanity, the midwife blamed mercury. Both were probably right. There's also the perfumers. You'd think they have it easy, surrounded by roses, herbs, oils. But extracting scent isn't romantic, it's brutal. Flowers are mashed by the ton, often soaked in rancid fats, then boiled and strained. Workers spend days inhaling fumes that cause headaches, fainting, even hallucinations. A perfumer in your town, old Gerard, has a twitch in his eye and fingers that never stop shaking. He says it's age. You know it's the lavender distillation process. It's beautiful, sure, but it bites back. And let's not forget the glovers, those delicate lambskin gloves everyone wants to wear at feast days. Skins are stripped from unborn lambs, soaked in alum and softened with milk. The workers call it white work. It's the closest they ever get to the elite. But none of these people ever wear the things they make. Can't afford it. Wouldn't be allowed. Their hands are too stained. Their breath smells too sharp. Their faces show what beauty costs. You've seen it. The coughing fits behind the dye works. The limps, the missing fingers, the slow collapse of someone who spent too many years grinding pearl dust with a pestle made of bone. But the nobles don't think about that. They see the final product, a flawless blue gown, a shimmering veil, a tin of perfumed ointment, and sigh with delight. No one wonders who stirred the pot. No one asks who got burned. You've heard of one lady who fainted during mass from the weight of her jewelled veil. It had been dyed with rare indigo, stitched with gold thread by a nearly blind seamstress, and dusted with orris root to keep it fragrant. She recovered. The seamstress didn't. And it's not just women's beauty that bleeds. Men's armour gleams because blacksmiths hammer until their lungs fill with metal dust. Their capes are rich because tailors squint under candlelight, hand-stitching until their eyes blur. Their boots shine because someone else rubbed beeswax into the hide with raw, cracked hands for hours. Beauty in this world is pain, sometimes yours, often someone else's. So the next time someone compliments your sleeves, you smile. But inside you remember the girl you saw last week behind the tannery. 12 years old, arms stained purple from dye. She smiled at you like it was nothing. And maybe it is. Maybe beauty only matters because someone's paying the price. But tonight, when you take off your gown, peel away the velvet and hang it carefully in the dark, you whisper a thank you into the silence. You don't know who you're thanking, but someone deserves it. You lift your hem and glance down at your shin. A patchy forest of dark hairs has sprouted again, and your heart sinks. You were supposed to be smooth, always smooth. Even here, where the fabric barely parts. Even here, where no one but your maid or your mirror ever looks. Body hair in this world is unacceptable. It doesn't matter that razors are rare, that shaving tools are crude, or that bathing is optional. What matters is that hair means coarseness, wildness, impurity. A woman with body hair is seen as barely human, animalistic, witchy, loose. The rules aren't written, but they're clear. Remove it, hide it, or be judged. And so, you grab the pot. Inside, a mix of quicklime and vinegar. It smells like burning stone. It acts like it too. This stuff dissolves hair, and a bit of skin if you're not careful. You smear it on with a stick, hold your breath, count to 20 and scrape. The sting kicks in at 10. By 15, your calves feel like they've been kissed by Satan, but the hair comes off. Mostly. The rest, you pluck. Historians still argue whether body hair removal was widely practiced or limited to elite circles, but evidence shows clear pressure on women to be as smooth as marble statues, especially in religious art. The Virgin, hairless, saints, polished. You, trying not to scream while rubbing ash into your armpits to absorb the follicles. And it's not just legs. Arms, underarms, upper lip. If it grows, it goes. Eyebrows are thinned to near invisibility. The forehead is plucked to reveal more skin, and anything else is quietly handled with wax blades or scorched linen. One local girl swears by hot sugar wax made from boiled honey and herbs. You tried it once. It ripped out the hair and half your soul. You limped for 3 days and still had red streaks on your thighs like war paint. But the alternative, worse. A patch of visible fuzz earns whispers. A dark line on your lip, unmarriageable. You know of a girl who was publicly mocked for having a witch's brow. She cried. Her mother burned off the offending hairs with a candle flame. That girl no longer blinks properly. Of course, no one talks about why body hair is so feared, but everyone acts like it's self-evident. Hair, manliness, hair, shame. If you're smooth, you're disciplined, elevated, controlled. If not, you're something wild from the woods. There's even a rumour, started by someone's overly confident uncle, that excessive hair is proof of demonic possession, or worse, French ancestry. Either way, you keep shaving, the irony. Men are allowed to be hairy, expected even. A beard means strength, chest hair means virility. Back hair, unspoken, but no one cares. A man can waltz into court with hairy legs and no one flinches. You wear a sheer sleeve and show a stray arm hair? Scandal. Still, some men get fussy. You've heard of knights waxing their brows to look more youthful. One even shaved his arms to highlight his veins, then had the audacity to mock a woman for over-plucking her chin. You dream of letting it all grow out. Just once. You imagine feeling the wind through your leg hair, standing by the fire and not worrying about stubble, but it's a fantasy. If anyone saw, it would be over. Your maid would be horrified, your mother would faint, your suitors gone, so you endure. You hide burns, rashes, red bumps from crude plucking. You wince as you walk after a lime vinegar wax goes wrong. You exfoliate with linen cloths dipped in salt water and pray the sting means it's working. One noblewoman, Lady Cecily, went too far. She shaved her arms with a dulled knife and ended up with infected cuts. Her skin turned purple. They said it was punishment. She said nothing, just wore longer sleeves until it passed. There's even a fringe group of religious women who claim hair is Eve's legacy, a punishment for original sin. They advocate for full body shaving, followed by oiling with anointing balm. Of course, they also believe menstruation is a monthly penance, so you take their advice with a pinch of holy salt. And then there's the alchemists. You visited one once. Paid 2 silver for a miracle depilatory balm made from snails, sulphur and powdered marble. It worked. Sort of. You also couldn't feel your legs for 2 days, but the balm sellers make a killing. Every market day they roll out tiny jars with big promises. Smooth as the Virgin's cheek, one claims. Blessed by St. Agatha, another. You once saw a merchant shout, "No itch, no sin," as he hawked his wares. He sold out before noon. Still, despite the pain, the burning, the judgment, you keep going. You keep your skin clear, soft and unthreatening. You move through the world like a polished statue with feelings, because hair is just one more trap, one more impossible box you're meant to fit into without complaint. You shave, pluck and scrub, all while pretending none of it takes effort. That you woke up this way. That smoothness is your natural state, not a battlefield covered in bruises and lime burns. And when someone tells you you're beautiful, so elegant, so refined, you thank them. You don't show them the red streak under your sleeve, or the tweezers in your pocket, or the skin still throbbing from your last vinegar scrape. You just smile, because beauty doesn't grow on trees. It grows in silence, after everything else has been pulled out. You sit at the edge of the bed, holding a linen ribbon between your fingers, twisting it tighter and tighter. Your gown is spotless, your veil pressed, your posture perfect. But none of it matters if your face doesn't sell the one thing that counts above all: purity. Not the kind you can prove, the kind people assume when they see you. You know what they're looking for: downcast eyes, pale skin, modest smile, not too full of figure. A virgin look, they call it. Soft, holy, untouched. Doesn't matter what you've actually done. What matters is that you appear innocent enough to be traded, married or controlled. Because purity in this world isn't just a personal trait, it's a political weapon. Especially for girls like you. Pretty enough to catch attention. Poor enough to need a marriage. Your reputation is currency. If you walk wrong, laugh too loud, smile at the wrong night, people start talking. The wrong kind of talking. And once that starts, you're not a girl anymore. You're ruined goods. Historians still argue whether this obsession with purity came more from church doctrine or feudal control strategies. Probably both. The church preached chastity as a virtue. Lords needed daughters to marry clean. Everyone else just wanted something to point at and say, "That's how a woman should be." So you learn to play the part. You adjust your veil to cover your neck. You avoid red lips or flushed cheeks unless it's a holy day. You look humble, but not poor. Modest, but not invisible. Just clean enough to be a blank canvas for someone else's plans. And, oh, the plans. Your uncle's been negotiating behind your back. Something about a dowry, a land dispute, and a minor baron who recently lost his third wife to illness. You haven't even met him, but your purity is already being appraised like a field of barley. Crop untouched, good yield. It's absurd. Men get praised for experience. You? For lack of it. Your body's like a sealed scroll, valuable only if no one's opened it. But here's the twist. Purity isn't just about behaviour. It's about your look. You've seen it at court. Girls faking the glow. They wear powdered pearl on their faces to appear soft and young. They avoid eye contact with men to seem shy. They raise their voices half a pitch to sound more virginal. Some even rub parsley under their eyes to cause light swelling, mimicking the puffiness of an emotional, sleepless girl. Yes, crying chic. That's a thing now. One noblewoman, Lady Breda, took it so far that she slept upright in a corner of her room for a year, hoping her pale, tired look would attract a bishop rumoured to favour holy types. It worked. Sort of. He married her, then ignored her for 3 months and disappeared with his steward. Breda still looks exhausted. And what if you can't fake it? Well, there's always the purity charm. A tiny cloth amulet you pin to your shift, embroidered with prayers and stitched with hair from a virgin girl, probably your cousin. Supposed to ward off suspicion. Also lice, but mostly suspicion. Men even talk about the glow, that ineffable aura certain young women have. The implication? It comes from virtue. In reality, it's good lighting, tight lacing, and not having had to plough a field in the last week. And here's the true heartbreak. You get no reward for keeping your virtue. No medals, no power, just the possibility of being chosen. Not loved, chosen. Like a clean cup someone might drink from later. Some girls snap. You've seen it. The quiet girl who suddenly dyes her lips red and doesn't stop laughing. the one who dances too close to the fire at the midsummer feast. People gasp. Men leer. Women whisper. She's branded ruined. No proof needed. One girl, Tess, from the village north of here, was caught alone with a boy from the abbey's kitchen. Nothing happened. Truly. But she got labelled a harlot anyway. Her parents married her off to a shepherd twice her age before the harvest. He's missing 3 fingers and drinks onion beer for breakfast. She hasn't been to a feast since. And what about widows? Or girls who've been hurt, used, married off young and returned with bruises and no coin? They don't get a redemption arc. They get silence. You've seen them. Heads bowed, eyes shadowed. Their purity was taken, stolen, or sold. Doesn't matter. In the public eye, they're finished. Meanwhile, rich men write poems about untouched maidens, priests preach about virgin martyrs, and painters obsess over the same pale, downturned face in every portrait. A virgin isn't a person, she's a concept, a symbol, a trophy, so you stay quiet. You smile with restraint. You walk slowly, eyes lowered. You wear lighter fabrics and pale colours. You avoid perfume, except maybe a hint of rosewater, for decency. And you keep that ribbon in your lap, twisting it between your fingers, wondering how long you'll have to play this part. Because sooner or later, someone will marry you. Take your purity, maybe gently, maybe not. Then you'll be expected to shift instantly from saint to mother, from chaste to useful. The ribbon snaps. You tie it back together. You're not allowed to break. Not yet. You sit beneath the window pretending to sew when the lute starts up again. Another serenade. Another off-key sigh from some second-born noble, with nothing better to do than chase your name around his wine cup. You don't even look up. You already know how this goes. Courtly love is the performance, the dance, the illusion that your beauty inspires poetry, virtue, longing. And maybe, if you're unlucky, a marriage proposal from someone who sees you less as a person and more as a decorative reward for his own emotional monologue. You're told your looks should spark admiration, that your eyes could launch a ship or start a war. But the truth? You're more likely to get traded like livestock after someone's compared your complexion to a swan and your soul to a candle. Courtly love is supposed to be about devotion, restraint, and noble suffering. A man sees you across a hall, writes you a poem, and pledges eternal loyalty, despite being married. You're supposed to smile modestly, drop a handkerchief, and say absolutely nothing meaningful for 3 months. It's all ritual, all for show. Historians still argue whether these romantic traditions came from actual relationships, or were just literary fantasies created by bored aristocrats with too many scrolls and too few wars. But one thing's certain, beauty is always the bait. You're the muse, the symbol, the divine feminine, which sounds flattering until you realise it means you're not allowed to have an opinion, or a pimple. Your value depends on how many men sigh when you enter a room, how many verses they write about the curve of your neck, how many tournaments they fight while wearing your colours. One knight broke his arm jousting with your token, a blue ribbon tied to his lance. His mother blamed you, as if you leapt from the stands and yanked the horse yourself. Another sent you a poem comparing your lips to the edge of a sword. You weren't sure if that was a compliment or a threat. You never wrote back. He composed 3 more. The third included a drawing. You burned it. And then there's the gift-giving. Rings. Poems. Crushed flowers. A vial of perfume that smells suspiciously like goat. One man tried to impress you with a dead falcon, said it represented his slain desire. You nearly vomited. It's not just nobles either. Even merchants and scribes have caught the fever. A boy from the scriptorium once etched your name into the corner of a holy manuscript. Got caught. Got whipped. Still swore he'd die in your light. You hadn't spoken to him once, and yet you're expected to play along. To keep looking the part. Flushed cheeks, dainty waist, pious eyes. Because if you reject a suitor too coldly, you're cruel. Too warmly, you're scandalous. There's no safe middle. Just the tightrope of appearing interested enough without being blamed for his obsession. The worst part, most of this has nothing to do with love, or you. You're just the excuse. One lady you know, Catherine, sharp-eyed, with hands like a blacksmith, had 20 poems written about her fragile grace. None of the writers ever noticed she was the best archer in town. Didn't fit the narrative. Another, Isolde, was serenaded every week by a man who once introduced her at court as the woman with thighs like marble. She married a baker, said she preferred flour to flattery. But not all women escape. Some get caught in the trap of being wanted, but never respected. You've seen the pattern. A girl becomes the centre of courtly attention. Her beauty becomes legend. Her voice, irrelevant. And when the men move on to the next muse, she's left with nothing but stories she never asked to be part of. One noblewoman, Lady Clarice, was adored for 5 years. Songs, dances, poems in her honour. But when her beauty faded after an illness, the court moved on like she'd never existed. Her name vanished from every song. Her face wasn't painted again. She took holy orders. Lives in a cloister now. They say she prays for the souls of poets. Probably not kindly. Even marriage isn't a safe end. Plenty of girls marry their admirers thinking it means love. What it really means is ownership. Your beauty pulled him in. Now it belongs to him. And if it fades, if childbirth changes your body, if age softens your jawline, you've failed your role. One lord annulled his marriage because his wife no longer inspired devotion, as if she were a candle that forgot how to burn. So you learn. You nod politely when flattered. You thank the bard when he sings, but you keep your heart locked tighter than your girdle, because you know the truth behind the flowery words. You are not his light. You are not his muse. You are not the echo in his empty hall. You are a woman, real, breathing. Tired of being a metaphor. But for now, you pick up your embroidery, keep your face serene, and let the music drift through the window. The lute's off key again. The words are wrong. But you keep still, because in this game, stillness is survival. You sit by the fire, sleeves pulled back, arm extended just so, letting the orange light kiss your skin. Someone glances your way. Good. That's the point. You're showing them, subtly, artfully, that your wrist is nearly translucent, that the blue veins beneath the surface form a delicate pattern like cracked glass. This is how people know you're not just beautiful, you're wealthy. Because in medieval society, skin is a status symbol. Not clothing, not jewellery. Skin. Pale, thin, clear, hairless, and if you're really lucky, borderline transparent. That's how people know you haven't laboured, that you haven't stood in a field or scrubbed a pot or touched the sun in weeks, that you're too rich to tan. It starts with the face. You already know this. White as parchment, lips soft and pale, cheeks just barely tinted with a whisper of rose. But it goes beyond that. Down your arms, your chest, your legs, every inch of skin has to scream, "I've never worked a day in my life." Historians still argue whether this ideal of translucence came from religious ideals of purity or just class arrogance dialed up to 11. Either way, it's now a full-time job. You don't have servants. You need them. To shield you from the sun, to fetch herbs for your pastes, to pluck and scrub and gently whisper when your neck starts looking ruddy. The ultimate prize. Veins you can see. Blue, delicate, faintly glowing under the surface. Women press their arms to cold stone walls before court appearances to bring them out more clearly. Some even tie off their upper arms with ribbon for a few minutes to make the veins pop. You've tried it. It works. You also passed out once. Worth it. The obsession leads to all sorts of strange rituals. You once soaked your face in milk and lemon juice for 3 days before a feast. It stung, peeled, then stung again. By day 4 your skin was dry as parchment, but ghost pale. Everyone noticed. One woman leaned over and whispered, "You look holy." You nodded, smiling through the flaking. There's also bloodletting. Yes, again. Not because you're sick, because you want to be faint. A few ounces drained here and there to lighten the complexion, flush the cheeks, make you appear more ethereal. You know girls who ask their physicians to let blood weekly during feast season. One girl had to be carried to dinner. She looked like a corpse wrapped in silk. 10 marriage offers by morning. You're told that paleness is beauty. But it's more than that. It's power. It says you eat clean food, drink filtered water, sleep indoors, and don't touch anything unpleasant. It's the visual proof that you're a lady. Meanwhile, your maid's hands are red and cracked from scrubbing. Her neck's gone brown from sun. Her calves are nicked from foraging through thorn bushes, and no one writes songs about her. No one paints her. Her skin tells a story, and people call it ugly. Even illness becomes confusing. The paler you are, the closer you appear to death. And yet, that's the ideal. You want to look fragile, delicate, almost ghostly, but not actually sick. Just sickly looking. Like you're too beautiful for this earth, but not quite ready to leave it. One noble woman, you've heard of her, kept herself indoors for 3 years, only ventured out after sunset. Her servants blacked out her windows and she took milk baths daily. When she emerged, people said she glowed. They said her skin looked like marble. She lasted 2 seasons before catching a cold and dying. People still talk about her beauty, and if you're not naturally pale, good luck. You try chalk powder, crushed lily, vinegar soaks, and God help you lead. It eats at your skin slowly, but it lightens. The sores come later. You know someone who wore white gloves everywhere, not to protect her hands, but to hide the scarring. Another smeared paste across her throat so often she couldn't speak above a whisper. That whisper became fashionable. Men too get sucked in. Night sunburn during training, then beg their squires to grind camphor balm to soothe the redness. Clerks stay indoors claiming study, but really they're avoiding freckles. A young squire once rubbed himself with powdered bone to look more noble, turned grey instead. His friends called him Lord Ghost. He laughed, then kept doing it. Some women fake the look with paint. White lead paste smoothed thinly over the skin, with blue pigment veins drawn lightly on the chest and arms. You've seen portraits like that. The women looked like porcelain dolls or saints, but they were real, and they were trying desperately to match a standard that was never real to begin with. Your own rituals are second nature now. Cold compressors every morning, a layer of powder before leaving the house, always shade, always a hat. You haven't felt sunlight on your bare arms in years. You're not even sure what your real skin tone is anymore, but no one questions it. They just see you, pale, poised, untouched, and they assume everything else must be perfect too, that you must be virtuous, that you must be wealthy, that you must be worth marrying, so you keep the lamps dim. You avoid firelight. It makes your skin look too warm. You walk only under moonlight. You mix new pastes from ground pearls and egg whites. One day, maybe you'll try that new solution made from crushed ivory. Dangerous, but effective. Because when someone looks at you, they shouldn't see you. They should see class, power, distance, grace. They should see skin that doesn't belong to the world, and believe it's what makes you beautiful. You feel the first flutter under your ribs and freeze. You're alone, in the garden, pretending to admire the roses, but now you're calculating. How many weeks? When will it show? Can you hide it until the feast at Lord Gerard's estate next month? Because in your world, pregnancy is not a glow-up. It's a problem. You're supposed to be fertile, of course. That's the whole point of you, apparently. But you're also expected to look as if nothing is ever happening below your collarbone. Graceful, contained, ethereal, a walking symbol of virtue and lineage. Not someone who gets bloated, sweats through her linens, or accidentally sneezes and pees herself. In medieval society, motherhood is worshipped in theory, painted in stained glass, written into songs, celebrated with carved Madonna statues. But the actual physical reality of pregnancy? That's something to hide, something vaguely shameful, as if the act of carrying a child reminds everyone you once conceived one, which is awkward in a culture obsessed with virginity. So here you are, pregnant, married, and still doing damage control on your image. You lace your gowns looser, add extra folds to your veils, learn how to stand behind furniture just so. Because showing too early could make people talk. Showing too late might make them whisper. Historians still argue whether this deep discomfort with visible pregnancy stemmed more from religious piety or courtly modesty spiralling into delusion. But regardless, you feel it in every glance, every awkward silence, every forced compliment. You look so... well. Translation: we know, and we're judging. There's no maternity wear, of course, no stretch panels, no soft elastic waistbands. You just relace what you have and suffer. Some women pad their sides to maintain the illusion of symmetry, even as their bellies swell. Others pin cloth inside their gowns to flatten the shape. You've seen noble women stuff lavender sachets under their armpits to mask the hormonal sweats. It helps. A little. Your friend Sabine tried wearing a girdle well into her 7th month. Said she wanted to maintain her shape. She miscarried in her sleep. The midwife said nothing, just looked at the tightened ribbons and shook her head. There's an impossible expectation that your face should stay clear, your ankles slim, your skin radiant. But pregnancy doesn't care. It swells your nose, reddens your cheeks, makes your gums bleed when you eat pears. You're exhausted, sore, and constantly hungry. But you still have to look modest, composed, and blessed. The irony? Everyone wants you to be pregnant. Just not visibly. They want heirs, sons, strong bloodlines. but they don't want to see you creating them. They want the outcome, not the process. And it's worse if you're unmarried. An unmarried pregnant girl isn't a vessel, she's a scandal, a cautionary tale. You've heard the stories. Girls sent away to visit cousins for months, others shipped to convents. One poor soul was made to sleep in the stables until her belly repented. The baby died. They said it was God's will. Even married, you're not safe. You're expected to produce children, but discreetly. You give birth in shadowed chambers with only women allowed. Men wait outside, pacing, pretending they're too noble to care while their wives scream through their teeth, praying they don't die. One woman you knew, Lady Anne, gave birth to 8 children. None lived past infancy. People whispered that she was cursed. Her skin broke out from stress, her hair thinned, her waist never returned. Eventually her husband took a mistress. Anne stopped attending court. She just faded. But if you're lucky, and you carry to term and the child is healthy, then you're allowed a brief moment of reverence. People will say you glow. You'll be painted in soft tones, baby in arms, eyes cast downward like the Madonna. They won't show the cracked nipples, the bleeding, the fear that every cry means something's wrong. You once overheard a bard say, "A woman with child is closest to God." You wanted to laugh. If anything, you feel closest to a broken wheel, rolling forward, barely holding together. Even your cravings are suspect. If you ask for too much food, you're called indulgent. If you ask for none, people wonder if the baby is thriving. You're expected to nibble like a sparrow, yet grow an entire human, and forget comfort. Sleep is a joke, your back aches, your bladder's a battlefield. But you still rise at dawn, kneel through mass, smile at the steward's son and answer every "When are you due?" with a laugh you no longer feel. Sometimes you wonder if the Virgin Mary ever wanted to scream. If she ever wanted to say, "I am not just a vessel, I am a person, I am tired." But no one asks, they just touch your belly, uninvited, and say, "How wonderful, you're radiant." So you nod, you say thank you. You hold your ribs and breathe shallowly through the tightening pain, and you try not to wince. You are a miracle, they say. You are a miracle pretending to feel magical, while everything inside you is stretching, swelling, shifting, while the world demands that you smile through it all. You kneel before the altar, candlelight flickering over the cold stone floor, and try to focus on the priest's words. But your gaze keeps drifting to the glass case by the wall. Inside it, the withered hand of a saint, perfectly preserved, bone-thin fingers curled into something like a blessing, or a warning. The hand is decorated, rings on every finger. A lace glove draped just so. People come from miles away to stare at it, to pray beside it, to whisper their wishes for beauty, love, purity. You can't help but wonder if the saint would have laughed, or screamed, because the church says beauty is dangerous, vanity is a sin, but at the same time it creates beauty standards that are downright divine. Saints are the church's supermodels. Holy women, preserved after death, are paraded through cities, dressed in silks and brocade, faces covered in gold masks or painted with care. They are supposed to represent spiritual perfection, but they also become literal beauty icons, especially for women. Historians still argue whether this display of relics was meant more to inspire piety or control behaviour. Probably both. After all, what better way to tell women how to act than to show them a saint with hollow cheeks, downturned eyes, and not a strand of hair out of place, even in death? You've seen it 100 times. Statues of St. Agnes, always young, always pale, always serene. Portraits of St. Catherine with flawless skin and delicate hands. Their stories? Full of blood and martyrdom. Their images? Flawless. And people look at them, then look at you. You're not expected to be a saint, but you're expected to try. So you mimic them. You lower your gaze, you soften your tone, you wear your veil a little longer each year. You smooth your face with oils and pray your skin stays clear, because the last thing you want is to look worldly. It's a strange hypocrisy. The church rails against vanity, but loves a beautiful martyr, criticises cosmetics, but fills cathedrals with stained glass women glowing with divine perfection, tells you to be humble, then surrounds you with icons that are anything but. Even the Virgin Mary, the gold standard of holy womanhood, is never depicted with frizzy hair, rough hands, or tired eyes. She's painted like a queen, luminous, above it all. But the only way you can get close to that image is by pretending you don't care how you look, which is hilarious because everyone else cares. You once heard a friar say, "The body's a vessel, keep it clean but plain." Then he turned and complimented the baker's daughter on how heavenly she looked with her hair tied just so. She hasn't worn it differently since. There's this constant double bind. If you're too beautiful, you're vain. If you're not beautiful enough, you're slothful. If you care, sin. If you don't, problem. You're supposed to float somewhere in the middle, effortless, godly, and vaguely untouchable, and then there's the fasting. Oh, the fasting. Women starve themselves not just for beauty, but for salvation. St. Margaret of Cortona lived on scraps and water for years. People say her skin turned transparent, that she glowed when she walked. Other women took note, began skipping meals, declining meat, eating herbs. One girl you know passed out from hunger and woke up to applause. You've seen the fasting girls, teenage saints in training. They whisper prayers and chew nothing, their cheeks hollow. They smile with cracked lips and sunken eyes. Everyone calls them angelic. You wonder how many survive. There's even a story of a nun who stopped eating completely, claiming she could live off the Eucharist alone. She was praised as holy. She died within the month. The church made her a local relic, and it doesn't stop after death. Saintly corpses are treated like dolls. They're dressed, preserved, posed. One in Italy was covered in wax and painted to match the ideal maiden. Her real face had decayed, so they made her a new one, perfect, smooth, untouched. She now rests behind glass surrounded by flowers. People say she looks divine. You think she looks like she's still trying to pass the beauty test. Meanwhile, real women around you are aging, breaking, bearing children, living lives the saints never had to survive, but they're told to be like them anyway, to ignore the pain, to smile through the scarring, to be beautiful without being proud. One priest warned the women in town against using cosmetics, saying, "God sees through paint." A week later you caught him sniffing rose oil in the market, sighing like it was heaven in a bottle. Of course, there are rebels. Quiet ones. Women who cut their hair short and wear wool when everyone else wears silk. Others who refuse to bleach their skin, even when their cousins whisper. One woman paints flowers on her cheeks, not for beauty, but to mock the obsession. People call her strange, you call her sane, but most of you are still trying, still kneeling, still copying the saints, even as your knees ache and your back twinges and you feel nothing like divine. Because the truth? You don't want to be worshipped, you just want to be allowed, to be seen, unpainted, and still be enough. But tonight, as you sit in the candlelight staring at a jewelled skull labelled St. Apollonia, you realise the church never gave you saints to inspire you. They gave you saints to replace you. The mirror lies. It always has. You stare into the polished silver disc, face glowing faintly from the candlelight, and wonder what people will see when they look at you tomorrow. Not who you are, that rarely matters, but what you can still pass for. Young, desirable, untouched, or just expired? You already know the answer. The cracks are showing, not just in your skin, but in the entire performance. Because finally, the mirror is cracking. You're not the only one who feels it. Something's shifting. The masks, the powders, the saints' painted faces, they're starting to look tired. Not just you, everyone. For centuries, beauty in your world has been about control, modesty, obedience, smooth skin, pale cheeks, quiet suffering. But now, the plague came and came again, and again. And suddenly people don't care what your hair looks like if your lungs are still working by morning. The luxury of beauty is wearing thin. Historians still argue whether it was the repeated waves of pandemic, the rise of urban poverty, or the slow grind of famine and war that finally broke the spell. Maybe it's all of it. Because when half your village is buried and the bishop's coughing blood at mass, no one's asking whether your veil matches your shoes. You see it every day. The gowns grow simpler, the dyes fade. The perfume sellers shout louder in the streets, trying to unload last year's stocks. No one's buying. Even the nobles are fraying. A duchess at court arrives with unpainted cheeks. The whispers follow her, but they're quiet, tired. Because who has time to gossip when prices are rising and soldiers are moving through the countryside? Some women resist, cling tighter. They double their powder, hide their greying hair under thicker veils. You once watched a woman reapply lip stain during a funeral. She said, "Grief is no excuse to look sloppy." Her hands were shaking, but others, more and more of them, start letting it go. A merchant's wife begins wearing her natural hair. It's wiry, unpredictable, beautiful. Her daughters follow. A barmaid shows up to the midsummer feast with sunburned arms, unashamed. She still gets 3 dances. A midwife you know stops bleaching her forehead and starts carving symbols into her veil instead. Charms for strength, not for beauty. It's not a revolution. Not yet, but it's a crack. A slow one, spreading through the plaster. And it isn't just women. Men are shedding their masks too. A knight shows up to council with a beard untouched by oil or ribbon. A scribe with ink-stained fingers stops hiding them with gloves. They look real, human, alive. Even the saints seem quieter, less convincing. The paintings are fading. The relics collect dust. You kneel in the chapel and stare at the statue of St. Cecilia, once radiant, now chipped. And for the first time she looks like someone you might have known. Someone tired of pretending. There's a new kind of beauty creeping in. One that doesn't glow, or glimmer, or sparkle under candlelight. It's the beauty of truth, of scars, of age, of dirt, of breath that smells like onions because at least you're still breathing. You feel it in your bones, in the way your maid no longer hides her hands, in the way your sister talks about childbirth like it's survival, not shame, in the way you look into the mirror and no longer try to smile, just look, and you're still beautiful. Not in the way they taught you, but in the way you never thought was allowed. You're still scarred, still powdered some days, still plucking, still smoothing, still surviving. But now it's your choice, and that might be the only power beauty has ever truly offered. Not in the approval of others, but in the moment you decide to stop asking for it. So tomorrow maybe you'll wear the patch, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll bleach your arms again, or maybe you'll let the hair show. Maybe you'll walk into the hall with your cheeks bare and your spine straight. Not because it's rebellion, but because it's enough. Because the game is ending, the standards are crumbling, and the women who outlived them? We're still here, still breathing, still seen. Wind down begins below. Take a deep breath now. Let your shoulders drop. You've walked through soot and shadow, pressed flower water into your cheeks, tied your ribs tight, and smiled while the world judged your every pore. You've done enough. Let your mind soften around the flicker of a candle, the whisper of wool against your skin, the faint creak of an old floorboard down the hall. Picture the paint peeling from a saint's face. Imagine it's freeing, not fading. This world was harsh. The rules made no sense. But somehow, through bruises and balm, blush and bloodletting, you survived it. You saw through the lies. You kept your spark. And that's more than any mirror ever offered. So close your eyes. Let the velvet drop. Let the mask slide gently from your face. You're not a painting. You're not a poem. You're not a saint behind glass. You're just you. And tonight, that's perfect. End of script. Sweet dreams.